Operation Twin Shells has just released to the test server, and with it comes some game-changing new operator reworks and the new operator scope hosts that will both mix up the meta drastically. So with the season's full release right around the corner, in today's video I'll be doing a new and updated attacker tier list, same as always. The operators will be ranked in alphabetical order and timestamps will be in the description for your viewing needs. Now let's go ahead and get into the video. Now, the first operator that we're going to be ranking in today's tier list is Ace, and he's going to be going in the S tier. Ace is just the definition of a overpowered operator. He has an amazing gadget that allows him to open walls with ease. He basically carries the attacking team in that front, and he also has a really good loadout to back it up, with the AK-12 as his primary weapon and him having the P9 as his secondary option. Overall, Ace is just a really amazing operator that probably should get some form of nerf in the future. Now, following up Ace is Amaru, who's going to be going in the bottom of C tier. I think Amaru is an operator that was never designed to be competitive in the first place, and that's totally fine, but in ranked, Amaru is really not that good. She's only useful in super niche strategies where you rappel through windows on maps like Consulate and Cafe, but even then, because her gadget produces such a loud audio cue, it allows the defenders to pretty much kill her before she can get through a window. Additionally, the LMG rework that happened a few seasons ago significantly hurts her ability to get frags because her only automatic primary option is an LMG. Overall, Amaru just really isn't that strong in the current day, and she probably never will be strong due to her being a somewhat casual operator. Now, after Amaru, we have Ash, who's going to be going in the A tier. I don't think anyone would be surprised by this. She just has amazing weapons. She has a really solid gadget that can allow her to deal with utility and to also open soft walls. And on top of that, she gets breaching charges as well, which allows her to do even more soft destruction. Overall, just a solid operator that you can't really go wrong with picking. The same could not be said about Blackbeard, who's going to be our first operator to go into the D tier. Blackbeard is in desperate need of a rework. His gadget isn't really useful at the job it's meant to do, which is protecting him from headshots. And the problem is, if Ubisoft was to buff him and make his gadget worthwhile, it would be unhealthy for the game because it obviously blocks headshots. So Ubisoft needs to go back to the drawing board on this and hopefully come up with some way to rebalance Blackbeard or to release him with a new gadget, so that way he's actually a fair and balanced operator to go against. That doesn't mean he's good right now, because he's not. He's one of the worst operators in the game, but if he was to get buffed, he would be a potential balancing issue. Now, after Blackbeard, we have Blitz, who's going to be going in the bottom of B tier. Blackbeard is a pretty solid pick after the shield rework, and being able to hide behind his shield to prevent himself from taking a lot of damage is good. And after impacts got nerfed, it's a lot harder for the defending team to counter a Blitz. I will say there are operators like Warden that just outright shut down a Blitz, and also operators like Legion as well. But generally, Blitz is going to be a really strong operator if you pick him in the right strategies, combined with other operators that can support him, like a Ying or a Finka. Now, moving on past Blitz, we have Brava, who's going to be joining him in the B tier. Brava is a solid operator for countering specific defenders, but for example, ops like Malusi or the new operator scope host are heavily countered by Brava. But if the enemy team doesn't bring any electronic gadgets for Brava to hack, then obviously her gadget isn't going to be useful. And so because of that, I can't justify putting her up higher in like the A tier, because she's by definition not good every round. But if you do notice the enemy team is picking operators that Brava is good at dealing with, then you can pick her as somewhat of a counter pick, and she can be quite successful at that. Now, moving on past Blackbeard, we have Buck, who is probably one of the most versatile operators in the game, and that's why he's going at the top of A tier. Blackbeard has his gadget, which is his underbarrel shotgun, which allows him to open soft surfaces from a distance, which is huge, and he gets access to his amazing primary weapons and his awesome secondary utility. Overall, just a great operator, one of the best solo queue operators in the game, and one of the best attackers in the game overall as well. Now, after Buck, we have Capitao, who's going to be going in the upper part of B tier. Capitao is a strong operator because he has good weapons, good secondary utility, and his fire bolts and smoke bolts can be useful for the team. However, the reason why he's not going higher on this list is because of the fact that his gadget is mainly useful for forcing defenders out of a power position or for covering a plant using his smoke grenades and his fire bolts. But there's operators in the game right now that do his job better, in my opinion. There's operators like Grim and Ying that just absolutely excel at forcing defenders out of power positions and for also helping the team hold down the plant. Now, moving on past Capitao, we have Deimos, who's going to be going in the upper part of B tier as well. Deimos is strong for reasons that's pretty obvious. He can literally just at a click of a button get wall hacks on any defender in the game, which can be useful for providing your team with information and for also potentially allowing Deimos to pick up some frags. The only real downside to Deimos is that his overall loadout isn't the best. The AK that he has at his disposal is one of the worst damaging assault rifles in the game, and it really just feels like a struggle to try to use. And then his pistol is solid, but it only has 6 bullets in a magazine, so if you whiff your shots, you're basically guaranteed to die. So because of that, I have to put him in the B tier instead of the the A tier. Now after Deimos, we have Dokkaebi, who's going to be going in the top of S tier. Even after the rework that Ubisoft is going to be giving her in Operation Twin Shells, Dokkaebi is still not weak enough to justify dropping her down a tier. Just because she has to wait a little bit to get her calls doesn't change the fact that her calls are still overpowered. They still stop the defenders from accessing any of their cameras. Her gadget still allows her to track roamers by forcing their phones to make a loud noise, and she still has the passive ability to be able to hack into the defender's camera system. She's just a really well-rounded operator that Ubisoft really didn't do a great job of nerfing. Now after Dokkaebi, we have Finka, who's going to be going in the lower part of B tier. Finka is a strong operator in combination with shield operators because of the fact that her surges make their ADS speed quicker, and because her surges also heal the chip damage from explosives that shield operators have to deal with. But if you're not bringing a shield operator, I think Finka is pretty useless for the most part. Just like with the healing operators on the defense that I discussed in my previous video, healing operators are extremely niche in Siege because if you die to a headshot, then obviously your ability is completely useless because you're not going to be able to heal for anything. So if you're going up against an enemy team that's good and that knows how to hit their headshots, then you're basically going to be rendered useless just by their skill alone. Not to mention, I don't think Finka's ability is strong enough to justify bringing her over some of the other operators that are on the attack unless you're going to bring a shield operator. Now next up we have Flores, who's also going to be going in the B tier. Flores is a strong operator for countering hard utility, things like deployable shields, bulletproof cameras, maestro cameras, and stuff like that. Kind of similar to how Brava is super useful against electronic utility. However, I think Flores' gadget is slightly better than Brava's. And the reason I say that is because Flores' gadget is more consistently useful. He can not only counter hard utility, but he can also counter electronic utility as well, since his gadget is explosive. And since he comes equipped with flashbangs and an amazing loadout, I think you can't really go wrong with picking Flores in a lot of rounds. It's just, if the enemy team isn't bringing bulletproof utility, you might be better off picking other operators. It's just in most rounds that won't be the case. Now after Flores, we have Fuze, who's going to be going at the top of C tier. The reason for this is because Fuze's cluster charges just really aren't that strong in the meta right now. They can be decent for opening vertical holes from above by using his cluster charges on a barricade or soft wall to open the floor near it. But generally, outside of that specific use case, you're not going to get a whole lot of utility out of cluster charges. They are extremely slow to deploy. They leave Fuze vulnerable while deploying them. They make a extremely loud noise when doing so, and they give ample warning to any defenders inside of the bomb site or in any area near them that they are going off, which means the chances of you getting kills with them is quite slim. Now I will say they do destroy a lot of utility on the site, which can be useful when you're going for a late round push, but generally you'd be better off picking other operators in the game for clearing utility. Now after Fuze, we have Glaz, who's going to be going at the bottom of B tier. Then that is simply for his ability to hold long lines of sight. The Glaz can sit on rappel outside the bomb site or just on a window in a long hallway, and he can quite literally just cut off the defense's rotation. And this is because of his scope's ability to allow him to see through smoke, which basically guarantees he wins any gunfight against the defender when a smoke grenade is in play. And since he has smoke grenades as a secondary gadget option, and his loadout overall is really solid, Glaz can be a really good pick on maps where the attackers have a lot of lines of sight from outside into the site. Maps like Border, Cafe, and Consulate come to mind. Now after Glaz, we have Gridlock, who's going to be going on the upper part of B tier. Gridlock is useful for cutting off lines of sight and for covering the plant later in the round, since her track stingers produce a lot of noise, and she has smoke grenades at her disposal as well. These aspects, along with her amazing loadout, makes her a pretty solid choice. It's just, in my personal opinion, I'd rather just put a drone on a flank instead of picking an entire operator dedicated to flank watch. But if you do want a flank watch operator, Gridlock's definitely the best way to go. Now after Gridlock, we have Grim, who's going to be going at the lower part of A tier. Grim really has improved a lot over the past few seasons. His bees now have a massive radius, their pings are more useful now, and they deploy a lot quicker. Plus his actual launcher has improved a lot, which lowers the risk of you dying while trying to get utility out of his gadget. And then on top of this, Grim has an amazing kit to his disposal that allows him to be a really strong entry frag. Overall, just an exceptional operator that is definitely worth considering in your roster on pretty much every round. Now after Grim, we have Hibanna, who's going to be going at the top of B tier. And the reason for this is because Hibanna is strong for getting hatches open, but if you're not getting hatches open, her pellets are just too slow to detonate and too slow to deploy to justify bringing her, because for getting walls open, she definitely sucks. And so since she only has really one good use case, I have to put her in the B tier. Now after Hibanna, we have Iana, who's going to be going to the top of B tier as well. Iana has fallen off a lot since she lost her frag grenades, which reduces the amount of utility she's able to provide significantly, but she still has access to infinite drones. She still has access to some pretty solid secondary gadgets, and her weapon loadout is amazing, which makes her a really strong entry fragger. The only reason why I'm not putting her higher on this list is because when you compare to operators like Ash that bring more utility to the team, I think I'd rather pick those kind of operators instead of Iana for the entry fragging role, but she's still a solid pick, especially in solo queue. Now after Iana, we have IQ, who's going to be going to the middle of C tier. There really just isn't that many reasons to pick IQ anymore. She is a solid counter to Scopos and for Valkyrie, but generally those use cases are too few and far between to justify picking her in most rounds. And even if you do see that the enemy team is bringing those operators, you'd probably be better off picking someone like Brava or Dokkaebi, who can actually outright counter those cameras instead of IQ, who can just find their location. She does have good weapons at her disposal and frag grenades, but that doesn't make up for the fact that her gadget is just simply weak. Now after IQ, we have Jackal, who's going to be going at the upper part of A tier. Jackal is a really solid roam clear. His goggles allow him to see footprints, which can allow him to track defenders and where they rotate to. He has amazing weapons at his disposal. He has a secondary shotgun, which can allow him to open soft surfaces, and he has good secondary gadgets as well. Overall, just a really solid operator. Can't really go wrong with him. The same cannot be said about Callie, who's going to be going at the lower part of C tier. Callie suffers from simply just having a really weak loadout. Her only having access to a bolt action sniper rifle as her only primary option puts her at a significant disadvantage in pretty much every gunfight she goes into. And since her gadget is an underbarrel attachment, it means that she's basically forced to have that sniper rifle out throughout the entire round. If you can hit your shots consistently with her, she can be decent, but for most players, that's not going to be the case. And her gadget isn't strong enough to justify picking her when she has that bad of a kit. Now after Callie, we have Lion, who's going to be going to the bottom half of A tier. And that's because of how versatile Lion is. He may not be overpowered in any of the categories, but he's just really solid across the board. His EM1D forces defenders to slow down and to stop being as aggressive, which can be a huge benefit to Lion's team since it slows defender aggression. He has a wide range of secondary gadgets that allows him to support his team, and his weapon loadout is pretty good as well. Now after Lion, we have Maverick, who's going to be going in the middle of B tier. Maverick is a solid hard breacher in most circumstances, but I just feel like he's fallen out of the meta a lot over the years because of how slow he is. Maverick has to manually burn through an entire wall or hatch if he wants to get it open, which takes a lot of time when compared to operators like Ace, Hibanna, or Thermite. But the advantage of him is that he can just absolutely bypass operators like Cade, Bandit, and Tubrau, which are very strong in the meta currently. But even though he does have that capability, I don't think it's strong enough to justify picking him. I don't think it's strong enough to justify picking him when he takes so long to open surfaces. Now after Maverick, we have Montagne, who's going to be going in the S tier. Last season, I believe I put Montagne in the A tier, but I think after playing against him for a little bit longer, I honestly think he's worthy of the S tier spot. Montagne is absolutely busted. After the impact grenade nerf, he takes basically no damage to explosives. His ability to force defenders back is realistically unheard of, and hide, especially now that he can sprint while hiding his body, and him being able to reload and throw smoke grenades and stuff from behind his shield as well is a huge addition that makes him a lot more useful for his team and lowers the risk of him dying as well. If you know what you're doing with Montagne, he can be an absolute menace and can help your team take map control in a way no other operator really could. I know this may be a controversial placement, but I realistically stand by it. Now moving on to our next operator, Nokk, who is another operator that's getting a rework in this season. I honestly think she's worthy of going up into the B tier now. Before, I used to have Nokk in the C tier area, but I think after the huge buff she's getting to her gadget, I do think she's worthy of this position. Nokk being able to sit still and walk without her gadget's durability going down is huge. It's going to make her a lot stronger at countering cameras. But you do have to keep in mind that her gadget still doesn't make her quieter when she's moving. So being able to sneak around the map is still going to be a challenge because you're going to have to avoid traps. You're going to have to avoid making a whole lot of noise, and you're going to want to wait until other things are going on that can mask your audio before you start moving. But as long as you follow those guidelines, you can pull off some pretty massive plays with Nokk that otherwise wouldn't be possible with any other operator. Now after Nokk, we have Nomad, who's going to be going in the bottom of B tier. Nomad is an operator that I find myself struggling more and more to justify bringing on my team. Her air jabs are really loud and obvious. They can be crouched under and just shot outright, which means that they don't really provide much utility outside of just slowing the defense down a little bit. And her weapon loadout and secondary gadgets that she has at her disposal could be a whole lot better. I will say her air jabs are decent in the post plant and for countering runouts, but if you plan on using them as a flank watch similar to Gridlock, you're going to be sorely disappointed. After Nomad, we have Osa, who's going to be going in the lower part of A tier. Osa is a really strong operator for doing basically what Glaz does, and that is holding really long lines of sight. If you can set up an Osa shield outside of a breach or on an outside balcony or something like that, looking into the bomb site, you can basically stop the defense from rotating in their tracks, and they're going to be forced to waste some sort of explosives on you to get rid of the shield. And if they don't end up doing that, then you can just pick up your shield and crouch into into the bomb site and then go for a plant behind the safety of your shield. This makes Osa a really strong operator on maps where there's a lot of lines of sight from outside of the map into the bomb site, and it also makes her really good on maps with a lot of breaches that have really long lines of sight from them as well. And that just so happens to be pretty much every map in the game, so it makes Osa extremely strong. But not only does she have those amazing shields, she also has access to frag grenades and EMPs, and she has a great loadout as well. Overall, just a really solid operator. And the same thing could be said about Ram, who's going to be going at the upper part of A tier. Ram is arguably one of the best vertical play operators in the game right now. Her drones being able to open walls and floors for her from a distance without risking her life is huge, because it can allow her to open floors and stuff without having to worry about nitro cells as much, and it can allow her to open surfaces so quickly that a defender doesn't even have time to react. This combined with the fact that she has the R4C at her disposal, which for a vertical play operator is insane, just makes her all the more worth picking. Now moving on past Ram, we have Sens, who's going to be the second and final operator to go into the D tier. Sens is in desperate need of a rework, and that's for obvious reasons. Their smoke projectors are extremely clunky, they don't really provide much cover to your team that a smoke grenade couldn't already provide, and Sens is heavily countered by Warden and also by explosives. This combined with the fact that their loadout isn't the best either just makes Sens a really hard operator to justify in the current meta. And after Sens, we have Sledge, who's going to be going in the middle of B tier. Sledge is still a really solid operator, but when you pin him up against his competition like Ram and Buck, there really isn't that much of a reason to pick him over his competition unless you have a specific use case for him. His hammers make him extremely vulnerable while he's opening vert holes, which can open him up to getting nitro celled. He also isn't as versatile as an operator like Buck, whose secondary shotgun can also be used as a weapon, and his weapon loadout isn't nearly as good as an operator like Buck or Ram. But so because of that, Sledge is going to be going in the B tier. He's still a solid pick, just I find myself leaning more towards Ram and Buck in most rounds. After Sledge, we have Sentry, who's going to be going in the middle of B tier. Sentry is overall just a solid pick. Getting access to 2 secondary gadgets is decent, but considering you're sacrificing a gadget for that, you can't really put him any higher than this because he doesn't have a gadget. His loadout is decent as well, but generally Striker is just your middle of the road operator. After Sentry, we have Thatcher, who's going to be going in the top of B tier, and that's just because secondary MPs have kind of removed the need for Thatcher. Like, you no longer need a Thatcher in every single round, but his EMPs are still strong because they have a really wide radius, which can allow you to deal with a whole lot of electronic utility with 1 EMP. But considering his secondary utility isn't that great and that his weapon loadout is kind of mid, I don't think he's worth picking unless you need to get a lot of walls open and around. Now after Thatcher, we have Thermite, who's going to be going in the middle of B tier as well. Thermite is a decent hard breaching operator for getting outside walls open, but as soon as you need to get an interior wall open or you need to get a hatch open, he slowly begins to fall apart. With Thermite having to walk up to the wall and place his thermite charges manually makes him vulnerable, and since his thermite charges make a really loud audio cue and they deploy really slowly, it makes it really easy for him to get bandit tricked or Cade tricked. When you compare him to his main competition, Ace, it really just is night and day. There's very few situations where you're going to want to pick Thermite over Ace, and so for that reason he has to go in the B tier. Now after Thermite, we have Twitch, who's going to be going in the middle of A tier. Twitch honestly is just a really solid operator. Her Twitch drones being able to counter electronic utility is huge. Her having access to the F2, one of the strongest assault rifles in the game, is solid, and her having smoke grenades on top of that is a decent addition. Just a really good operator. Now after Twitch, we have Ying, who's going to be going in the top of S tier. I've been a big proponent of this for a while on the channel. If you've watched my previous tier list, I generally think Ying is one of the best operators in the game right now. Her ability to force a defender out of a position or to take map control is really unmatched. Those Candelas can come in absolutely clutch for your team and can open up the enemy team to giving up free map control or to giving up free picks early in the round. This combined with her smoke grenades makes her a really solid operator for executing onto the site and for supporting her team to get the plant down. And she gets an LMG on top of that. There's really no holes in her kit, and Ying really doesn't hold back at all. The only real bad part about Ying is that she is heavily countered by Warden, but as long as the enemy team doesn't bring Warden, your round is going to be absolutely smooth sailing. Now after Ying, we have Zofia, who's going to be going at the upper part of A tier. Zofia is just a solid fragger. Having access to the M762 assault rifle and the LMG LMG, one of the best assault rifles in the game and one of the best LMGs in the game, already puts her on good footing. But also having a launcher that can shoot impact grenades and stun grenades, basically making her a better Ash, helps her even further on this front. The only thing really holding Zofia back is that her secondary utility isn't that great, but you don't really need good secondary utility when all of the other aspects of your kit are that good. Now after Zofia, we have our final operator, Zero, who's going to be going in the middle of C tier. I know a lot of people think that this placement is somewhat controversial, but I stand by it. Zero's cameras really aren't that strong because they emit a really loud audio cue when they're deployed. They have a really bright light that reveals their position when they're hidden, and when you agile through surfaces with them, they reveal their position as well. However, if you remove Zero's cameras from the equation, he is a pretty solid operator outside of that. He has the Gone 6, he has really good secondary gadgets, and his weapons are some of the strongest in the game. But when your gadget is that weak, it kind of holds you back on a tier list, because I can't justify putting an operator high on a list just because their loadout is good. Anyways, that about wraps up today's tier list. As always, these videos are strictly my opinion, and if you disagree, feel free to leave your takes in the comments down below. If you enjoyed today's video, I make Siege content just like this twice a week, so go subscribe to the channel and follow me on Twitter if you don't want to miss the next upload. If you want to watch another video just like this one, a video will be popping up on your screen right now that I'm sure you all enjoy. I'll see you next time, friends, and peace.